Every show I try and take a moment, even just for myself, whether it's pre-show, post-show, whatever, and just sort of take a minute and remind myself that I'm real lucky to be getting to do what I'm doing. There's a lot of hard work that goes into it. Don't get me wrong, but at the end of the day, I'm real lucky to be involved in the sport I love the most, the profession that I want to be involved in, working with people that I freaking love at every level of it. So to be honest with you, Tom, like my favorite memory is just taking that moment every show, I guess.
What's going on, guys? It's your boy, Tom Talk Trash, and stand back for another interview. This time, I'm joined once again by Spencer Love from Love Wrestling to discuss the history of Love Wrestling, basically, both its YouTube channel and the promotion. So, welcome back on the show, my friend.
Good to see you. It's great to see you. You and I, like, we're in each other's DMs fairly often, but it's just nice to see you face to face. You know what I mean?
Definitely, yeah.
Good to see you, bro. Thanks for having me on again.
I was like, I really want to do another podcast with him because I like our first one, but that was during the era of what I call the rushed interview, where you had to pay. I wasn't paying for Zoom at the time, so it was like, okay,
you have to slam in every question in like the 40-minute time limit
exactly.
or whatever it is.
Now I figured, like, let's just pay for it. Let's just do that.
Lay everything back, be good to go with her.
Exactly. So, but if we take this back, my friend, what came first with Love Wrestling? Was it the YouTube channel or was it the promotion itself?
Content side. So I was involved in content creation, wrestling, journalism, whatever sort of phrase you want to put on it, from about 2017, 2018 on. I started with a site called Wim Column Sports, just based here out of Edmonton. And literally, dude, I started out just writing like once a month WWE like pay-per-view previews. The guy who ran it was a friend of mine. I had never written before. He just knew I was a wrestling fan, so offered me basically, I'll buy you a beer every time that you do an article. So I started writing a lot of articles.
when you're young, like we sort of are, that's quite like, I'll take that.
Oh yeah, and it was a blast. And by no means did I think it was going to be. Did by no means I start writing those thinking, oh, this is going to lead to me running a promotion one day.
Yeah,
it's just let's do it. It's a lot of fun. So just because I like being on social media a lot, started to grow. I started to figure out ways that I could get a little bit more involved. That led to me doing a lot of stuff here with the local independent promotions. And then during the pandemic, basically Win Column Sports just shut down. And that's when sort of the brainchild for the content side of Love Wrestling came around. So January 1st, 2021 was the official launch date of the content side of Love Wrestling.
So what was the initial plan when it came to the content side, and how has it changed from your, like, because we're in January 2023 at the time of recording. What was your initial plan with Love Wrestling? And then how have you seen it change in the 2 years you've been doing it?
The biggest thing, and when it went to Win Column Sports, I loved it. But what we became was just strictly Edmonton focused, strictly our local area focused. And I still firmly believe to this day that, like, Edmonton, Alberta, as far as wrestling goes, you won't find any better. I'll stand by that. But I was very lucky to start getting opportunities interviewing, say, individuals from MLW or Impact or Ring of Honor. And because our brand was so focused on Edmonton, I found myself struggling. Oh my God, how do I tie this back? So Win Column Sports, for all of the stuff that it gave me, for all of the stuff that I loved about it, it was limited just in the way that the brand was sort of set. So when we started Love Wrestling, as cheesy as this is going to sound, dude, like, we quite literally started it just wanting to celebrate whatever we loved about professional wrestling. Yeah. So for example, if I wanted to hop on and recap my favorite Royal Rumbles of all time, which seems appropriate for the month we're in, you can do it. And if you want to interview anybody from, you know, your local area to the biggest promotions in the world and everything in between about whatever you want, you can do it. If you want to create content with recaps or previews or reviews or whatever it might be, there's room for it. I really wanted to take the limitations off what people could cover. The only real modus operandi we've got is there's certainly stuff I don't like, and there's stuff that everybody in professional wrestling doesn't like. But even when we're talking about stuff we don't like, we really try and skew things to the positive end of things, just because it can be such a cesspool, professional wrestling, whether you're talking about internet, whether you're talking about politics, whatever. It can be such a negative cesspool, and we really wanted to avoid that. And I'm really, really proud that as far as what's changed, certainly the types of content that we're doing, the production value, all of that. But at the heart of it, we're still very much the same in that we want to come out and celebrate the freaking wonderful, wacky, ridiculous sport, entertainment, athletic venture that professional wrestling is. So it's changed a lot, but in a lot of ways, and in the best of ways, hasn't really changed at all.
What is something from the early days that you wish you'd kept, maybe, and then what is something that you're like not glad that you don't do anymore from the early days, but like are happy to leave in the early days? I'll put it that way.
I just think, to be honest, a lot of the production value from the early days, because when you look at a product now versus what we were putting out then, it's just evolved so much, as we've all learned, myself on the production end of things. Zach is our graphic designer, who by my money is like putting out the best wrestling posters in Canada at the very least. When you're looking at the guys from Between Two Beards, who I know you're more than familiar with.
Beautiful guys.
Even just their end of things was very cool, because their first episode was on Love Wrestling. It's not as though they came in with a content creation background. And when you watch their first episode versus where we're at now, it's very, very cool. We're very proud of a lot of the early content, all of the early content, really. And there's never really been anything that we've taken down or anything. You can quite literally watch like the stuff we launched the site with. But as far as stuff that like we're really proud of now, dude, like everything. When you look at what Josh is doing, again, it's all the comparisons. A lot of the content stayed consistent, but when you look at the stuff Josh was doing in season 1 of The Legacy of versus now on season 3, it's unbelievable the growth in everybody on the content end. I think it's been really cool.
You talked about the Between Two Beards crew, their first content foray really being on the Love Wrestling channel. So how did you sort of how do I phrase this question? How did you sort of tell them like you'll be all right and stuff like that? How did you sort of show them the ropes? And how do you show like new content creators the way without being too involved? I hope that question made sense.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, Tom, because you're right. It's a bit of walking a fine line, right? If they were going and doing, and with anybody, if you're doing content on your own, really there are no rules. For me, when it came to JPJ and Pluggo, it was real easy. They came and they approached me. They joined the site March of 2021, right around there, because we were just looking for people to hop on and do some live streams while we were in WrestleMania season. And while we were all on screen, those two just obviously hit it off. They've got a real natural chemistry with things. And they approached me about April or May, just shortly after Mania ended. And said that they had spitballed the idea. So as far as like any rules, regulations, anything like that, like there ain't really much input that I've got on anyone's content. I do approve it if they come to me and say, I've got this idea for X, Y, and Z, and it doesn't really fit our brand. Cool, right? If they come with the I Hate Wrestling podcast, probably not going to air on Love Wrestling.
No.
Luckily enough, number one, that's never been the case. And then anybody who's come in and created content, literally the only rule in this baseline is this sounds like, as long as you're not going to go out there and offend a targeted group, again, as ridiculous as that sounds to have to make a rule, that's really the only rule we've got. Other than that, come in and put out what you want.
Do you think you brought up there about still having to have that be your only rule? Do you think you'll ever get to a stage, or society even will get to a stage where that will never be a rule?
God damn, I hope so. And that gets into a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, I know that's a big question.
To hope. But, I think you and I can both speak to the fact that professional wrestling, even over the last, say, 5-10 years, still has a lot of growth as far as that goes. But I really do think that professional wrestling as a whole is coming as a whole out of those real rough patches, for lack of a better way to put it, or maybe those times where wrestling wasn't for everybody in a lot of ways. I'm really, really proud to be a part of professional wrestling right now, because not only is it like better than ever, to be as cliche as possible, but when you're looking at the in-ring, but the environment I think that professional wrestling is creating worldwide is a lot more welcoming than it used to be. And that's a freaking wonderful thing.
I definitely agree with you. You talked about there being the environment being welcoming and stuff like that. What is the environment like backstage at a Love Wrestling show?
I am so damn proud. I'm really, really damn proud. We've said since the start that our modus operandi with that, at least as far as the environment we wanted to create, was just have great pro wrestling and better people. And I stand by the fact that the individuals who have stepped in our ring are the most talented wrestlers in Canada in their respective territories, whatever boundary you want to put on it. But the backstage environment, and knock on wood, because again, we alluded to it earlier, Tom, on like how politics can be and all of that sort of stuff. Thankfully, we haven't run into that. I'm really, really privileged to be surrounded by the people I am. And I know I speak for the rest of the staff on the Love Wrestling crew that I really don't think, and there are a lot of great locker rooms out there, but I really don't think there's a locker room like ours. We've just got such a welcoming community, a very inclusive community. Nobody is meant to feel less than, and that's all I've ever wanted at a professional wrestling show as a fan. And I'm very happy that, at least in my own way, because the locker room comes down to the people in the locker room, not the person running the show, for lack of a better way to put it.
I know what you mean.
But I'm very lucky to play my small part in that locker room, I think, and I'm very lucky to be surrounded by people who make a great locker room for us. We're really lucky there.
When it comes to booking your I said guests. That's not actually. We'll go with guests first. When it comes to
we can do either. I've done both.
Right. When it comes to booking your guests for like interviews, how do you go about that for Love Wrestling? But then, how does that process differ when you're asking someone to wrestle on a Love Wrestling show? That's what I was trying to say.
No, but it's weird because I was going to say, for me, the process is fairly similar. I mean, obviously, you're looking for different things in ring versus what you're looking for in an interview. Interviewee, that's a better way to put it.
I know what you meant.
Subject's a weird way to put it. But for me, I really like unique stories, and that's pretty well everyone in professional wrestling. I don't think that that's unique on my end. But when you're looking for an interview subject, I love when you sort of get the opportunity to get people while they're doing the media rounds. And really, there's not many interviews that I don't want to do. But I especially look forward to when I get to do someone's first interview, maybe, or their first interview after a big title win, or something's happened, maybe on the unfortunate end, but it's just a really easy, maybe they've left a promotion and they're looking for new opportunities. People in that sort of wheelhouse where maybe they haven't done a lot of interviews previously, haven't done interviews in a while, and you really get to tell like a full picture story in a lot of ways. In professional wrestling, it's a lot of the same. Edmonton and Canada as a whole, like, I don't need to tell you, but we're surrounded by great professional wrestling promotions, and all of them do great in their own respective ways. So for us, if we want to stand out, it's not just bringing great professional wrestlers, because maybe a great professional wrestler's been to promotion A, B, C, X, Y, Z, 1, 2, 3. For me, I really like to bring in people who, again, have a great story behind them and will bring a great professional wrestling match. For example, getting the opportunity to bring Rachel Ellering up here for Love Pro Wrestling. It was her first match back in Edmonton in 7 years. Like, she trained with the Storm Wrestling Academy, wrestled her first singles matches here, and to have that opportunity was fantastic. Not only is it someone who hadn't been here in a while, but it's someone who had a real foundational root in Edmonton. The same can be said about Giselle Shaw. And then on the flip side of that, in some ways, getting the opportunity to bring Willow Nightingale up for the same show that Rachel was on. She'd never wrestled in Western Canada before, and to be able to have something unique like that is very, very cool. So I like doing things for the first time, or I like something where people sort of turn their heads and say, oh, wow, that's cool. I think every professional wrestling promoter, professional wrestler, everything in between does. But I like being able to make people say, oh, shit, in the positive sense of the phrase.
Yeah, definitely. So when you are looking, if someone wants to be on a Love Wrestling show as a wrestler, I'll put it that way, how can they get your attention? Is it like, do you answer DMs? Do you look at footage you're sent? What's your process?
I'll be honest with you. I will look at everything. Like, I don't ever want anybody to lose out on an opportunity just because they maybe didn't approach the route that whatever it might be, right? Like, for all I know, that's someone's only form of communication, whether it be, like you say, with a DM or something like that. So anybody who's reached out, at the very least, I'll look at footage, or I'll take a look at the DM or whatever it might be. But as a promoter, my own personal preference, this could be different for others, but the more you can provide me on the professional sense, whether that be, I've had people send me resumes, their entrance music, promo shots, a highlight package, and matches they like, all in a Google Dropbox. And for me, that's really made people stand out. It shows that not only are people wanting to work places, but they're willing to put in the preparation and present professionally, for lack of a better way to put it.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
And I do think that professional in professional wrestling is a very important part of it, right? So like I said, I'm never going to discriminate. I've certainly booked people based on them sending me a DM and me checking out a couple of their matches. But if I was to say my preferred route, I think the more you can provide, the better.
Who's the most professional wrestler you've ever booked?
Man, it'd be really hard, and I'm certainly biased here, but it's very, very hard for me not to look at Michael Richard Blaze as like the epitome of professionalism. And I know that that's going to sound a bit backward, because it's not as though he had to send me a resume in that proverbial Google Dropbox. I'm very lucky that we've had a great relationship for years, but just the way he carries himself backstage, the way he approaches our talent, the way he trains his students, everything in between, as far as what I think a professional wrestler should be. I think he really epitomizes it. And frankly, Tom, I don't think you'd find a lot of people, whether in Edmonton, whether anybody who's come out for our shows before, that would argue that. Maybe they'd give some different answers just based on people they've worked with more. But like, I really think that if you're to look at Edmonton at the base level of it, but I really think Canadian pro wrestling as a whole, MRB is the epitome of a professional wrestler.
Who do you want to book that maybe you haven't had the chance to book for Love Wrestling? For either an interview,
a million people. That has actually been that's been the hardest part of being a promoter. Is there are so many people that I would love to work with, whether on the professional end, the personal end, anything in between. I've been very lucky to work with a lot of people that were on my bucket list. Chelsea Green was certainly on there. Veda Scott was certainly on there. But pretty well anybody that you've seen that's not Edmonton based has been someone I've had on their proverbial checklist of wanting to work with at some point. People who I'd like to in the future. Man, there are so many great pro wrestlers out there. I'd love to work with Speedball Mike Bailey. Obviously, I think that guy's just the standard bearer, or one of the wrestlers of the year, not just in Canada, but in this industry. Love to have him out here at some point. When you look at people on the Canadian independents consistently, I'd love to have Ben Ortman's out here, Gabriel Fuer's out here, Casey Ferreira, who's actually just starting to wrestle out in BC. He's fantastic from everything I've seen. There are a lot of people out there that we'd want to continue to bring in. I really think that the Pacific Northwest as a whole, I could probably point at any freaking pro wrestler and be like, yeah, that one. I'm a kid in a candy store when it comes to trying to book people, to be honest with you. It's a very good problem to have. We're such a talented country right now. We really are. Like, we're lucky that we have to have that problem.
I know he would be an import, but I have to throw his name out there. I would love to see you book. Do you know who Simon Miller is from What Culture?
Oh, you freaking betcha I do. Excuse me, I gotta plug my computer back in. I unplugged it.
Oh no.
Oh well, we'll get there. It would be a sponsor interview if I didn't mess something up, hey?
No, but
there we go.
Going back to the original, I'd love to see you book Simon Miller for a show.
I think it'd be fantastic. And again, just like a great professional wrestler, by all accounts, a great human being, and like the epitome of an entertainer too. I think people hear entertainment in professional wrestling sometimes, and they look upon it sourly, for lack of a better way.
Mm-hmm.
Pro wrestling is the best form of entertainment on the planet. It ain't just the coolest sport on the planet, you know?
Yeah. So that's my one to throw in the ring. I know he's an import, but I'd love to see that. So as we've been going for about half an hour, so we are going to probably wrap this up soon. But what are some of your favorite memories of Love Wrestling over the years?
There's a lot. Every show, and this is going to sound so very cheesy, but every show I try and take a moment, even just for myself, whether it's pre-show, post-show, whatever, and just sort of take a minute and remind myself that I'm real lucky to be getting to do what I'm doing. There's a lot of hard work that goes into it. Don't get me wrong, but at the end of the day, I'm real lucky to be involved in the sport I love the most, the profession that I want to be involved in, working with people that I freaking love at every level of it. So to be honest with you, Tom, like my favorite memory is just taking that moment every show, I guess. There are a lot of specifics I really could point to, like at our first official show, quote unquote, March, when we really started like the LPW canon. We got to pay off a storyline that the Rads had built where we pretended Lumberjack Larry Woods was lost for 6 months. He made like no booking appearances, no nothing like that. Him making his entrance for that was so cool. Getting the big pop from the crowd, awarding our first grand championship. There have been a lot of matches that I, as a fan, wanted to see here in Alberta for years that we got the opportunity to put on. Gigi Ray and Zoe Sager main eventing LPW 7, right? Like the Bollywood boys getting out here, Chelsea Green coming out to work here, getting the chance to work with heroes of mine like Casey Spinelli and MRB and Matthews and everyone in between. Like there's a million of them. I'm very, very lucky to get to do what I do, and very, very grateful that I get the opportunity to every month.
You talk about how grateful you are, but what do you do on, say you've got a show day, or say you've got an interview booked, but you're like, my brain just isn't there. Like, I need to get in work mode. How do you put yourself in the mode to like be in the zone to do what you need to do? I'll put it that way.
It's different for both, because for me, like an interview, and in the kindest of ways, is a lot less rigid. I'd like to think at the very least, if I've earned the opportunity to interview someone, if I have to reschedule because of a mental health issue or whatever it might be on my end of things, I like to think we'd be able to reschedule that interview, just on the sense that, like, if anybody was to ever approach me and say, hey man, I'm not feeling it today, can we reschedule an interview, whatever it might be? Okay. When it comes to like actually running a show, I suppose it's even different for me than it would be for a talent. I really believe that if a talent was ever to come up to me and say like, look, I'm not in this today, I can't do it, you've got to do right by them in that sense. You've got to do right by their opponent, in that, if somebody's struggling mentally, physically, whatever it might be, and they need to take a match off or whatever, you got to be able to do that, to trust their safety, everything in between. For me, not in an unfortunate way, but unfortunately, if a show's going on, even if I'm not in the headspace, I do have to sort of get there and sort of try and push myself through it. And frankly, that's where I think a lot of the gratitude does come in, because there have been shows where I maybe wasn't at my mental best, but I'm grateful to be doing what I'm doing. I'm lucky to be doing what I'm doing. And as cliche as it's going to sound, like all of those problems really do tend to evaporate, even if only temporarily, once you come through the curtain and you get to see a full, at least in our case, a full Rec Room South Edmonton Common, and get to hang out with people celebrating the thing that I love the most on this planet, right? So it is tough. It is tough sometimes, and I don't doubt that on interviewing end, show end, anyone's end. But yeah, I think sometimes you are fully in the right to, well, all the time you're fully in the right to claim your mental health, own your mental health, and take time away from things. Personally, at least on show days, I've found it real helpful to be able to push through it even temporarily and get out there and do what I love.
That was a very beautiful answer. I'm not going to lie. That was brilliant. But as we,
I ain't just a pretty face. I could sometimes talk.
That was brilliant. But as we look at wrapping this up, Spencer, because I do want to be respectful of your time. You've been on the show before, so you know what this segment's called. It's called.
Oh, I love this segment.
It's called generic.
I was looking forward to the full thing. I was looking forward to this segment too.
It's called generic questions. Those of you that have seen my interviews before will know this is where I ask my guests their favorite match, favorite pay-per-view, favorite wrestler's theme, favorite tag team, and favorite wrestler. But because this is a love wrestling conversation, they're going to be love wrestling based, Spencer. So what's your favorite match from Love Wrestling?
There have been two that I would call my favorite, and not just for being great matches, but two that I would say are real meaningful. I mentioned one earlier, Zoe Sager versus Gigi Ray from LPW 7. That for me was just like the first real culmination of it was just a perfect storm, for lack of a better way to put it. Edmonton and Millwood specifically came out. They fully supported. They got behind the hometown girl. It was a great environment. You and I even talked in our first interview. We're like, I love me a partisan crowd. That was a partisan crowd for Gigi Ray that show. And then when Michael Richard Blaze won the LPW Grand Championship, winning that in the ladder match against Randy Myers and Golden Boy Travis Williams, again, just very, very meaningful to get the opportunity to really tell that story in the way that we wanted to, put on a not just great ladder match, but series of matches leading to it, and crown our first grand champion. So those would be my two.
What about favorite wrestling, love wrestling event overall?
I think LPW 10, our latest, I think, because in the kindest of ways, I think we keep getting better and better. Not even just as far as the matches themselves go, but just as far
production,
as the structure, the production, exactly. We're incredibly lucky to have what I think is the best tech crew in Albertan Pro Wrestling. And Mike and Ken, every show, again, they're just bringing more and more and more and better and better and better. It's just, it's cool. Because you know what, Tom, if we were to have this conversation next Tuesday, I'd probably say LPW 11.
Fair. So what about, these are going to be hard ones because it's going to seem like you're playing favorites, but what's your favorite wrestler's theme that's on Love Wrestling?
There have been a few. Eli Surge has a great theme. A lot of them are custom themes too. So like I admittedly don't have any names. Eli Surge has a great theme. The Rads theme is really fantastic. I have to give them that. MRB's got a fantastic theme. Zoe Sager, I'm a Paramore sucker. Absolutely.
Me too. I love
right. So Zoe Sager's got some great music. Jack Pride. I really love me some Beastie Boys as well too. Looking down the barrel of a gun.
Just quickly, this is going to go completely off topic. Favorite Paramore song?
It has to be Misery Business, and I know they took it on the set list for years, and rightfully, don't get me wrong. If they wanted
I was going to say that as well.
If they wanted to pull it out of their set for the reasons that they chose to, I completely understand and support that. But you can't deny it's a bop. So I'll have to go with Misery Business.
I love that song.
Hell yeah, it slaps, so the kids say.
It so does. But back to the wrestling questions. Favorite tag team on Love Wrestling?
Right, favorites. I wish I have a lot of great tag teams come through. It's hard to argue with the champs. The Short Kings are fantastic. I'm really excited to see what we've got in Eli Surge and Elliot Tyler next month. The Clandestine Society aren't only tearing it up for us, they're tearing it across frankly the entire Pacific Northwest at this point. State of Emergency was really cool, even albeit only having the one match for us thus far. The Billington Bulldogs, like we're really lucky. I think we put on some good tag team wrestling and love pro wrestling. Paralira, of course. The answer is yes.
Fair enough. Okay, and then as we wrap this up, who are some of your favorite wrestlers that have wrestled for Love Wrestling?
Shout out to the Clandestine Society, Michael Richard Blaze, Stephen Crow, Taryn from Accounting, Michael Allen Richard Clark, Zoe, like all of them. We're very lucky, man. I could name any single one of them. Zoe Sager, Son of Virus, Jack Pryor, like anybody that's been in our ring. You know, I think we're very lucky to have a very good, solid foundation of not just Edmonton-based wrestlers, but of about 15 to 20 people that are at each and every show for us. And the people that we're able to sprinkle in every so often because of their availability or distance or whatever it might be, are damn great too. I think we're real lucky as far as Love Pro Wrestling goes. And I think it's something that maybe we've got a bit of a leg up in some ways, is that Edmonton, when you look at sort of the hubs, quote unquote, of Canadian wrestling right now, you know, we're not central by any means, but we're a little more central than some of the other provinces and territories. So the fact that we're able to bring people from Ontario and BC pretty well every show, Saskatchewan every show, like we've had every province west of Winnipeg, or west of Quebec, west of Winnipeg's a Jerichoism. But we've had every province west of Ontario, west of Quebec, represented in a Love Pro Wrestling ring, and that's very, very cool for me. So I could quite literally, man, if you give me a couple minutes, I'll pull up our cage match and I'll list every wrestler who's been in our ring because they're my favorite.
Fair enough, man. But to be honest with you, Spencer, I think that's a beautiful way to end this conversation. So the question I end all my interviews on, you know this because you've been on the channel before, is one piece of content you want to be remembered for and one that you don't. But I want a specific Love Wrestling moment of like what is one match that you want Love Wrestling to be remembered for, or one match or interview that maybe you don't want to be remembered for?
As far as a Love Pro Wrestling match or show or anything, what I want to be remembered for, I think LPW 7 to this point is like the best long-term overall show, the best partisan crowd, the best of the best in what I think we've been able to put out to this point. So I think if people are going to go back and watch anything, I'm very confident in all of them. I would be proud to present anything up against anything from any promotion anywhere in the nicest way. I'm real confident in what we've been able to put out over the last year plus in Edmonton. But LPW 7 just is always going to hold a bit of a special place in my heart. That was our August event. A lot of great people coming up for the first time ever. That was, I brought up earlier, Veda Scott was a part of that show, not only as an in-ring competitor, but having them on commentary was just, again, really meaningful for me for that event. Getting them on there with Big Bad Boris and Thaddeus Archer III, two of the best in this country, in my opinion. That meant a lot. So I'd say that as far as a piece of content I don't want to be remembered for, any of my early interviews, I would say, and not because of any of the subjects, but because of me. I was very nervous, right? I was very, very nervous doing my first few interviews. I'm certain everybody listening to them at the time or now could certainly tell. So again, full credit to a lot of great individuals that have chosen to continue to support me, because I'm sure when they first answered the phone and they heard, how old would I have been? 24, 25-year-old Spencer saying, "Oh, hello, sir. Hello, ma'am." In like a terrible interviewer voice and doing a worse interview. Excuse me. Thank goodness they kept taking chances on me.
I know exactly what you mean. Like, I've been there, but I think we all have as interviewers. But as we look at wrapping this up, Spencer, where can the good people find you, Love Wrestling, and all your content?
Well, if you want to find me specifically, you can find me at Spenny Love on Twitter. I'm not really active on social media much outside of that, but feel free to give me a follow. If you want to follow all of us at Love Wrestling, though, not only just myself, but there's a lot of great people doing great stuff over there. So give us a follow wherever podcasts are played, video is viewed, or awesome content is created by awesome individuals at Love Wrestling CA. We also run live professional wrestling live at the Rec Room South Edmonton Common on the final Friday of every month. Love Pro Wrestling presents its next event, at least as of the time of this recording. This Friday, January 27th, LPW presents the Blue event at the Rec Room. Tickets are sold out. Tune in on Twitch. And if you're tuned in following this coming Friday, January 27th, tune in for Love Pro Wrestling 12. I can't reveal the title yet because it hasn't been revealed on social media.
Fair enough.
We'll talk when we're done recording. You're going to pop for it. But I'm very, very excited for that one. That one will be February 24th at the Rec Room South Edmonton. Tickets are all on sale.
You can find that on all of our social media. I'm going to be totally honest with you. You could reveal it if you want to, purely because this conversation may go up after that.
Oh, well, then you know what? I will, as long as Scout's honor that you're not going to put it out before then. But yes, you can check out Love Pro Wrestling 12 Streets Ahead, based on the friggin' best TV show on television, formerly Community. 6 seasons, and the movie is finally coming this year. LPW 12 Streets Ahead, taking place on February 24th in Edmonton, Alberta.
I love that. But
I'm excited. I'll send you the poster.
Brilliant. As we wrap this up, guys, obviously, thank you for all the support as always. Thank you to Spencer for coming on. If you want to follow me on social media, you can find me on Twitter at TomTalkTrash. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And I will see you in the next interview. A goodbye now.